You know, a lot of folks may think, well, electric cooperative, what are they going to talk about in terms of innovation? And, you know, I guess the one idea that I would like to leave with you today is that infrastructure enables innovation. And the slide here illustrates the National Academy of Engineering at the turn of the century. They took a vote nationally on what is the technology innovations of the 20th century that made the biggest difference. And they said the greatest achievement was really the electrification of America. You know, I personally believe that it's going to be essential for fiber optics to be available to every premise in America here if we're really going to have the level of, continue the level of innovation and things that's possible. So that's just from an infrastructure standpoint, infrastructure enables innovation. Inside the home, you're going to see a lot smarter, much more efficient appliances. Within the realm of innovation, I think this infrastructure of fiber optics is really, really important. For an electric company, we use that for automation. You've heard of the smart grid. A lot of folks don't really understand what the smart grid is. It means a lot of different things to different folks. But for us, it's the ability to really be able to monitor and control and see what's happening on the grid. And what that's going to mean for all of us as Americans is the grid's going to become more and more and more reliable over the next 5 years as more of this technology is deployed and the communication systems improve. And within 5 years, we're going to see, I'll call it a tipping point of renewables and dispersed generation becoming more and more common. You know, we probably all know the location where we see a lot of solar, for example, today. In our local area, we're seeing more of it deployed. In the next 5 years, I think we're going to see a lot of evolution in technology of the solar generation itself. Electric vehicles, needless to say, with the next 5 years, I think we're going to see a lot of adoption.
It just kind of happened real quick where I just took to leaving HP and basically decided I was going to roast coffee for a living. And I know it's a pretty far stretch going from a technologist to a coffee roaster, but I rationed that innovatively I could apply my core competencies as a technologist to really kind of putting coffee in a bag. Basically just started roasting coffee and putting it in a bag and giving it one bag to friends. And innovation led me to start understanding how to take data, meaning my customer profile, and just stepping and repeating what we were already doing successfully, which was roasting coffee. So it really wasn't about the coffee as much as it is about me, trying to understand who the customer is and applying what we understood in a broader way. And so we began to kind of get interested in open data and big data and micro data, meaning the very minute details of who our customer was. And then innovatively going to market with that. That I thought that whatever could be digital will be digital. And if we could understand how to apply anything that we could get digitally, whether that is creating a sale on the internet, you're just basically hyper-extending what you're already doing successfully today in a retail market by doing it digitally.
So in preparing for this panel, I looked up the term innovation. I guess we all just think we know what that term means, but I thought it might be useful moderating a panel to look it up. And I was surprised the very simple definition was the act of doing or creating something new. And Todd, I want to sort of pose a question to you here. One of the things that occurred to me is that new is not always better. New is not always helpful. Sometimes new comes with disruption. And one of the slides, Todd, that you put up had an array of solar panels. And, you know, we all read about the coming age of solar and solar power and things like that. And I'm curious about how does a company like Habersham EMC, how do you look at technologies like that that have all this tremendous promise? If in 5 years, if a home produces energy and stores it on new batteries, how do you see the role of the utility changing, and how do you embrace that as opposed to view it as anything that may be disruptive in business?
So for us, our number one goal is to be on the side of the consumer. And And ultimately, if that means that technology develops and evolves and that these renewables are the way to go, then that tells us very clearly that's the side we're going to end up on, and we're going to drive toward that. It could be somewhat disruptive, the path to it, but it also gives us a lot of opportunity to innovate new ways, to build new connections, and actually drive maybe some different thinking of ways to do that.
Forrest, let me ask you, I've heard this term thrown out that kind of stuck with me called necessity entrepreneurs. And it's interesting because I have friends and colleagues who, in large part around the recession, became entrepreneurs because they took a hobby, a passion, an opportunity that presented itself. And it sounds like your story fits within that. And I'm curious to know, do you see that as a trend? Do you think that it's something that that is unique to you? Do you have other colleagues? What are your thoughts about that?
Jump and Go was born out of necessity. I really can't think of a business that if it isn't scalable, it probably is not mapping to necessity, whether that be the internal need of the company or the end user. And so I don't think a fiber is innovative. What I think is, the way my mind works is I start thinking, well, innovation is how you use that fiber. Perhaps, innovators are trying to find a way that they can say, well, either I'm tired of my job, or I need a job now, or I got laid off, or whatever. What's the next big thing? And so I think that's very pervasive. I think a lot of people are out there, out of necessity trying to figure out what's next.
Innovation is incredibly expensive. It can be. And it's a numbers game. So we hear the stats about 9 out of 10 small businesses fail. And if you play that forward and look at entrepreneurship, startups, if you look at innovative projects within companies, it might go to 100 to 1 in terms of one project actually makes a breakthrough and achieves something great. So how do you play that game in terms of being able to play a numbers game and have all this innovation happening, realizing that most are going to fail? And what I've seen most of the companies succeed at in this is to find ways to fail cheaper and faster. The very culture and the very focus of a makerspace is creative people come together for the joy of making and sharing and things like that. So there's this culture that's grounded in the trivial. I think what we find, though, is that if you look historically at trivial activities, for example, if you looked at computer clubs in the 1970s, you would have found them tinkering with a piece of electronics. Well, ultimately, we know the story. What grew out of many of those became the personal computer, which evolved into mobile and so on. Hewlett-Packard was founded in a garage. Today, there's a lot of keychains. I think I'll admit to you. There's also some examples of a 3D printer, for example, came out of a makerspace in Brooklyn.